Well, Jordy, I think you forgot two of the most important ones, but let me start with number two. That's John Givens back there. He's an attorney with the wildfire cases, and of course, Michael Watts is up here with me. Michael and I are leading this charge. Let me just give you a little description what I've been doing for the last month or two. You know, because this case is considered a mass tort litigation, meaning there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of claimants. That raises all kinds of issues in the courtroom. And from the very beginning, Judge Cahill called me and a number of attorneys to have this conference. And the first words out of his mouth was, I am not allowing 200 attorneys in my courtroom to talk at the same time. That's crazy. It just can't be done. I don't think he can fit 200 people in his courtroom. So he ordered us to organize as plaintiff attorneys to come together, even other attorneys representing other clients. And he ordered us to come up with various organizational schemes whereby we have different committees to do different things. And one of the most important ones that came up right at the beginning was called the Liaison Committee. The Liaison Committee is made up of 5 attorneys who the judge will allow to address the court. These are the attorneys that will talk to the court, make the legal arguments, argue the motions and everything else in the courtroom. I was appointed as one of those 5 attorneys on the Liaison Committee. So for the last 2 months, I've had the privilege, I guess you call it that, to have to try to organize 120 plus attorneys to get them to agree how we're going to organize and how we're going to approach the court and how we're going to file all the motions and get trials set, get case management orders approved by the court. And let me tell you, it has been very, very difficult. Okay, we finally got the plaintiff side reasonably organized, reasonably in agreement, at least 95% of us. But then we got to deal with the defense attorneys. And for the last couple of weeks or so, I've been dealing with the attorneys for Hawaiian Electric, for the Bishop Estate Kamehameha Schools. I've been dealing with the attorneys for the County of Maui and the attorneys for the state of Hawaii. There's a couple other defendants that may get in the case. We're still waiting for their attorneys to make an appearance. So after getting all the plaintiff's attorneys almost on board in one agreement, we're now in the process of trying to get the defense to come to an agreement how even the defendants can approach the judge in light of, literally thousands of claims at the same time. This has proven to be even more difficult. As of right now, the defense really has not agreed to anything to make anything easier in court. In fact, what I've seen is that their whole strategy is to delay the cases, and that is not right. All the victims of this horrendous fire needs to be taken care of as quickly as we can. Unfortunately, I did tell most of you who signed up with me, it will take years. But if the defendants have their way, it would take decades. Okay, it's our job and my hope that we're going to get this done a lot sooner. Okay. So every step of the way, they have been objecting to everything. Every step of the way, they've been fighting and delaying things. But things are starting to get on track. One of the other plaintiffs had their scheduling conference this week. Judge set a trial for November of next year. And he opened the discovery process. That's a big, big plus for us. We have one of our cases going to a scheduling conference on November 1st. That's going to be a major hearing because not only have they been delaying everything, they've been trying to hide everything and trying to cover up everything. From early on in the case, Hawaiian Electric was out there trying to remove evidence that's important to the cause of the fire. And that's why Michael here and John, both of them were here on Maui before the weekend. You remember this happened on Tuesday. These guys were here by the weekend with some other experts walking the grounds trying to preserve all of the evidence we could get before Hawaiian Electric had a chance to remove it. Fortunately, one of the judges on Oahu issued an order that they stopped that, and everything's pretty much came to a halt. But again, their tactic has been to delay things and then to hide it or cover it up. Michael made contact with a whistleblower He now lives in Virginia. He was critical to the decision making at the board of directors of Hawaiian Electric. He has some very, very important information for us. He is under a confidentiality agreement whereby he cannot release it but for a subpoena. So I issued a subpoena for him about a month ago. And what did they do? First thing they did was object to the subpoena, saying it was no good, saying we can't do it now. So we gave them more time. We had another conference about it. They still objected, and until this day, they are still objecting to that subpoena. And the reason they're doing that is because they know this person has some very damaging evidence against them. Rest assured, we're going to get that. I expect to get it later in the month of November. But either way, we are going to get that information one way or another. And I think the judge is going to allow me to do it come November 1st in that hearing. So I just want you to know that there's a lot of litigation going on in the background. You don't see it in the newspapers and all that. All you see is the politicians and the governor talking about all these great things that's going on. But I want you to know Hawaiian Electric and the rest of the defendants are fighting this, okay? And I also want you to know we are fighting them tooth and nail every day. Every single day I'm dealing with these defense attorneys. And as I try to get this case on track, Michael here is putting the whole case together so that we can present the best case we can for you. So that's what I got for you tonight. Now I'm going to turn over to Michael, and he can bring you up to date how the case stands. Okay?
Thank you. Folks, I'm Michael Watts. Let me just start off to tell you that I'm so sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. The tragedy is not just the loss of what's going to be over 100 people, but the loss of one of my favorite spots on the earth. I've been to church there. I like to tell the joke that to me, Hawaii only has one island because it's the only one I ever come to. I went to Pearl Harbor once just so I could say I went, but I love it. It broke my heart when I found out that it was Lahaina. I was working on a case in New York, putting up experts on the 2nd, the 5th, the 9th, the 11th, and the 14th, and people started calling me because I have a lot of experience. I just don't know how to turn on a mic. I've done a lot of these fires. You heard Jordy talk about a case in 2017 in Northern California. I just happened to be in Sacramento when that fire started, and I was doing kind of a practice court called a focus group, and I couldn't breathe. My larynx kind of shut down. I couldn't figure out why I was getting sick, and I couldn't breathe, and it was from the smoke 50 miles away for these fires that started in Santa Rosa. And I literally that day started researching wildfire litigation and cases in California and the like, and I actually flew to Alaska to give a speech about doing this kind of litigation with a lot of people, which is kind of what I specialize in. And by the time I got back to Denver on a layover, I called my partner and I said, we're going to open up an office in Santa Rosa, California. We're going to help these people. And he says, where's Santa Rosa? We're from San Antonio. And I said, well, and so we did. And Jordy and Spencer and all these guys came with me. We opened up an office, and before you knew it, we represented 2,000 people who had been burned out of house and home by something called the Tubbs Fire. In the middle of that litigation, PG&E, the utility there in Northern California, burned down the town of Paradise. We opened up a second office right outside of Paradise and represented 14,000 people who were just destroyed by what was the worst wildfire in American history. You probably heard about this big settlement with PG&E for $13.5 billion. I negotiated that settlement. I cut the deal, and I'm just proud to tell you that entire towns are getting rebuilt because of the money that was done in that litigation. So the first thing I want to tell you is I'm here because I believe in the law. I believe in the power of the law, if done correctly, to literally transform what happens. I've seen communities where there's a disaster like this and there's either not a lawsuit or it's handled poorly, where it creates a regional recession. People just move away. But that is not going to, it's not going to happen to your town. If we do this right and we organize it well and we litigate it well, it will be the mechanism that causes you all to be able to rebuild your community. I've seen it happen before, okay? Let me just ask for a show of hands. I sat right here and gave a presentation about a month ago. Who was not here a month ago when I spoke last time? Okay, a lot of you, good. Okay, that's what I needed to know. So that presentation was pretty lengthy about what caused the fire, so I'm not gonna repeat it all, but I'll give you kind of the abridged version of it, and we'll figure this out. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about what we talked about last time. For those of you that were here, you'll remember it. I'm gonna tell you about new information that we've gotten in the last month, the claims versus the various parties that we're going to sue, a little more update on the litigation process that Jen talked to you about, the different ways that this could resolve so that you can rebuild your homes, and then some work that each of you are going to have to start doing. Now, I've watched too many times, it's like that movie Groundhog Day where Bill Murray gets up and does the same thing over and over again. That's become my life with wildfire cases. Every year there's another one, there's another community wiped out, nothing as bad as this. But I want to give you one piece of good news. I see the trauma in your eyes. God did not wire us to run for our lives from a 50-foot wall of fire. God did not wire us to lose our neighbors in a conflagration like this. God did not wire us to be ready to be burned out of our homes and everything we've ever owned. And it breaks my heart for you. It makes me mad because I see it year after year after year, and it's preventable. It's entirely preventable, okay? But we're gonna have to do some work because in litigation, there's two sides to a lawsuit. There's what's called liability, which is a lawyer word for who done it, who's responsible, and damages, how much do they owe you for what they've done. We have the burden of proof. We have to prove liability, that they're at fault, and we have to prove your damages before they owe you money. And so the damages side is where you're going to have to do some work with me, and we'll talk about that, okay? So let's start with what we discussed last time. Jordy, this thing is not working. Why don't you do that, and I'll just turn this around and hit on it for a little bit. They got one job, is make sure it's got a battery. It was working before. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Well, you want to sit there and click it or what? Why don't you grab a chair and then we'll try to get this fixed. Okay. First of all, I want to tell you about our team. Literally, Jan mentioned, go ahead and go to the next slide, that 3 days after the fire, I was on this island. I was in New York working on a different lawsuit. And I just couldn't stay away because I kept getting calls and I kept being told that this was a grass fire of unknown origin. And I saw it, and we can get on Google Earth and kind of figure out where these things started. And it was real obvious to me that that was just utter nonsense. But all the press for the first week said this was a grass fire of unknown origin. So I flew out here through the night, interviewed a bunch of people. Some of you heard about this. It was real obvious to me very early on that this was a utility-caused wildfire. So the second thing is put together a team. Jan and I got together. We agreed to work together, and thank God for that. Thank you for saying yes. And thank you for looking out for me. But we've also got a gentleman by the name of Chuck Choi on Honolulu. He's a bankruptcy specialist because it's my prediction that the liabilities that exist when you burn down 2,700 homes and structures and kill 100 people are more than the entire assets of the utility. So there's a high risk of bankruptcy. So Jan and I went and found the best bankruptcy man in Hawaii, and that's Chuck. So that's your team. And this still doesn't work. Do what? Hey, Spencer, why don't you just come hit it until we figure this out?
You're turning it off.
Do what?
You're turning it off, so you just keep it on.
Oh, okay. I'm doing it, so I'm not working. All right.
Hit it.
It's not working.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, it's just not moving. Okay. Last time when I was here, we took that picture, and I told you about the case against Maui fires, Hawaii Electric. We talked about 10 things, and I'm not going to repeat them all, but the bottom line is that the very first wildfire I did, the defense was, oh my God, it was high winds. It was like a hurricane. This can't be our fault. That didn't make a lot of sense when you live in a hurricane zone and you put, wires up and you have to make them hurricane proof in effect. But Hurricane Dora was 500 miles away, caused the winds, but these things all happen in high winds. They failed to shut the power off, which is what's called a public safety power shutoff. We've been complaining about that not happening in California for a decade now. Everybody in California knows that you have to do that when you've got a low humidity, high heat, high wind situation, a so-called red flag day. And that's what you had. We've got to prove that their equipment started this fire. And then I'll show you how it progressed, what it destroyed. In a lawsuit, there are theories of liability called causes of action. If you prove a theory of liability, you're entitled to your actual damages. If you prove that they were really bad and knew this was going to happen and decided to let it happen because of money, which is what happened here, there are punitive damages involved. And so we'll talk about where these cases are and how we can best work together. So what did we discuss? Well, let's talk about this new information. So first of all, how did the fire start? You now know it's up on Lahaina Luna Road. This is the pole that fell down in high winds. We know which pole it is. We've been up there, we've interviewed everybody, and the like. It fell down. When poles fall down, 2,000 volt wires hit the ground. They ignite grass, which is the fuel, which leads to a fire. That happened in the morning at about 6:38 a.m. Now, the reason that you were able to figure all this out in the newspaper is literally when I was here that weekend and started interviewing people, I leaked it all to the press, to the Washington Post, to the New York Times, to Bloomberg, to everybody, because everybody needed to know that what they were feeding you was nonsense, okay? And so the bottom line is that the pole falls over there because these poles have been around for 60-something years. They're made of wood. They rot in a highly corrosive environment. They get termites. This company knew that they needed to replace these poles, told the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission they were going to do so, said they were going to do so between 2018 and 2022, and in order to hit corporate financial performance objectives so that they could pay the dividends, so they could get their corporate bonuses, they deferred this program. And we've got the documents showing what they didn't do and when they didn't do it. All right, we've got a bunch of experts. I'm spending money, my bankers tell me, like it's on fire on this case. That's okay. Okay? What I've learned is when you take on some of the biggest companies in the world, don't nickel and dime it. Okay? We'll end up representing thousands of you. And the story I tell, this is Mike Schultz. He's the world's best fire cause and origin man. In the Northern California case in 2017, he charged me $1 million. He was out there constantly for over a year. If I only represented you, those expenses have to be repaid, and that would eat up your recovery. But by representing 2,000 people, each of you got the world's best fire cause and origin expert for $500 a piece. So you get economies of scale. So Mike Schultz has done work for me in every wildfire since 2017 and for 20 years before then. Okay? He was out here 4 days after me pulling down evidence. There's a gentleman by the name of Steve Irwin from Dallas who documents burn patterns, collects data, digitizes it all. It's in effect reconstructing an accident, but in this case is reconstructing a fire. He's been out here. There's a metallurgist by the name of Bernard Cuzillo, who's one of the top wildfire guys in the United States. They've all been out here. They've all documented the evidence on your behalf. Okay? We know exactly what happened, and we are not guessing. Okay? Now, what else has happened since I was here last? Well, back then, the number of deaths was 97. There were 31 people missing. It's gone up, unfortunately, to 99. That's the present number of deaths that we know about. There are still people missing. There's some confusion because sometimes they're taking DNA from multiple people and calling it different deaths when it's in fact the same person. But the bottom line is that somewhere between 100 to 110 of your neighbors will have lost their lives by the time this is done, which is just terrible. In the last month, in addition to being out here, we use the United States Congress on your behalf. In the House of Representatives, and I try not to talk politics, I don't know who's a Democrat here, who's a Republican, and I don't care. We're all Americans first. But a Republican-dominated House of Representatives that is dysfunctional as can be, can't pick a speaker, they wanted to know what happened here. So they called a hearing of the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Oversights and Investigations. The hearing was entitled Investigating the Role of Electric Infrastructure in the Catastrophic Maui Fire. Now, I have a lot of friends in Washington, a lot of lobbyists I deal with, a lot of people in the Congress. This didn't happen by accident, and we were in Washington feeding them questions to get what's called free discovery. And they invited the chief executive officer of Hawaii Electric to testify. There was a room, about 20 Congress people, all of whom want to be on camera showing how tough they are, which is great. All of them being fed questions to ask the CEO. This is myself and my daughter Haley. We know the questions that are going to be asked, if you know what I mean. And we got some really good answers. This is the hearing room. I'm not supposed to be taking the picture, which is why it's kind of a secret by the lap thing. And there she is. They're all being sworn in up here. And I'm shooting bootleg video to show to you. It was on TV, but this is the CEO of Maui Electric. What does she say? Her name is Ms. Kimura, as you know. She basically fessed up in direct questions that were asked that their pole, the one I pointed to you, collapsed or fell apart in high wind. When asked why hadn't that pole been replaced, well, my understanding is that we simply have not gotten to those poles yet. When you look at their data, they didn't get into those poles yet because replacing poles costs money that they were supposed to spend between 2018 and 2022, that they made the conscious, deliberate decision to defer so they could keep hitting earnings marks. And I've got the document showing they didn't spend that money. And the poles hadn't been replaced. So yeah, they hadn't gotten to them because they decided not to get to them. The second thing that she admitted, which I was very pleased about. So John Givens, my law partner, a Hawaii lawyer. I like to tease him. Where's your house? Which island? Molokai? Molokai. Yeah, he's lived on Molokai for a long time and in Alaska, half year. And he's got a bar license here for a long time, you know, and I think it's just so he could cheat taxes coming down to Hawaii. I'm kidding, but anyway, he's been a lawyer for a long time. I said, finally, you've got a case you can work on when you go to your vacation home. But you know, John's been here. He agreed to move to work on your behalf. He has interviewed everybody that will talk to him, and he's done an outstanding job. And the bottom line is that we know exactly what happened. So let me just give you a little bit of backdrop. The upcountry fires happened the night before. We've got it on video. There's a bird sanctuary that some of you have read about, where we see the video where a tree falls into the line. There's multiple fires up there. It's all trees falling into the line from an absence of vegetation maintenance. Okay? So if you live up there, you got a heck of a case. But it's also important to your case in Lahaina because it's notice. It tells them that the winds are high enough that we've got a dangerous situation. That's when they should have cut the power off, but didn't. Okay? They had plenty of hours to prevent this. So what happened? At about 3 in the morning, some folks that lived along Lahaina Luna Road happened to be up. I met with her about 2 hours ago. She looks out towards the substation farther up and sees a bright flash, which is what happens when poles fall down, okay? Or trees fall into poles and the like. She notes it. She doesn't know what it is, but she knows the power's knocked out, which is very typical when you have a fault. The air conditioner's not working. It's hot. They're sweating. They wake up to go to work. A lot of them are getting ready to go work at the hotels and the like. The air conditioner's not working. The lights aren't on. And then about 6:10 a.m., everything charges up. Somebody restarted the power. Now there's a basic rule in utility safety. You never restart power that has been knocked out by an event without walking the line, visually looking to make sure there's nothing in the line that could cause a fire. They didn't do that. They were 250 yards from a substation. Somebody started the power at 6:10 in the morning. All those people tell me their air conditioner went back on. The lights went on. And the fire started at 6:39. We know that because of one of your neighbors named Shane True, who happened to be up, was working on his roof, turned on his camera and literally put it on Twitter live. And we've got that video. So, 6:30 a.m., she admits that it was caused by fallen Hawaii Electric power lines. Power lines fall when your poles degrade. Okay? We have an investigation that they've done. Bystander video, that's Shane True's video. One of our lines fell during high wind conditions and sparked the fire. This is what's called an admission. We have her under sworn testimony that says their utility equipment started the fire that started at 6:39 in the morning. Now, I met with a gentleman earlier who took video of this. We know what it looked like. We know the winds were high. You don't need me to tell you the winds were high. But the Maui the Maui Fire Department goes out there and tries to put it out, does put it out for a long time, and then there's a rekindling, if you will. And I'm sorry. Okay. So the bottom line is we have this subcommittee. We got the subcommittee to subpoena a lot of their records which have been produced. And so even though they're delaying in the lawsuit, we've got a bunch of discovery through this congressional hearing, which is a big deal. You know from reading the newspaper that the 9/11 tapes have been released. There's what's called the Freedom of Information Act. I'm not going to take you through what they all say, but the bottom line is it confirms what you know. This was a terrifying day. Terrifying. We know that they've allowed you all back in. I'm going to take off my lawyer hat and put on my doctor hat. Now beware of a lawyer that pretends he's a doctor. Okay? It's appropriate that they let you back in. You need that for closure. You don't want to be there long. When houses burn down, we all have plumbing and wiring that when it burns, it combusts into stuff that's arsenic, highly, highly dangerous stuff. If you're around that for too much and too long, you get sick. So while it's okay that they went to let you all see your homes, or what's not left of them, don't stick around there. Don't dig up stuff. Stay away from it because we know what happened in 9/11. Yes, ma'am.
What about our pets? What about the animals?
Um,
We weren't allowed to go get them.
yeah, it's okay if the animals are there and you can get them. And by the way, I've got good news. I understand they're not going to let you in for your health, but they'll find the animals. And I can tell you in North Bay, there were cats that were gone for 65 days that were reunited. They will find the animals if they're still alive.
We're not looking for them.
They'll find them. If they're alive, they'll find them. Okay? Now, the bottom line is like the 9/11 situation, don't dig around in that stuff. It's highly toxic. Okay? All right, so what are the claims against the various parties? Number one, the electric company. Their equipment started the fire. They were on notice. There was a hurricane in 2018 that started what was then the largest wildfire in Maui's history, about 9,000 acres. Burned down a house of a gentleman whose house burned down in this fire, resulted from a pole that fell not 50 feet from the pole that started this fire. Okay? It's just direct notice. Hurricane Lane. So let me tell you about the case against Hawaii Electric first. It's solid. First, Jan told you that I got called by a whistleblower, and I did. His name is Mark Thaler. He was a consultant to the chief executive and the chairman of the board and the board of directors of this company back in 15, 16, 17. He's got a ton of stuff to say, but he's been muzzled by a confidentiality agreement. There's a friend of mine who was a whistleblower against General Motors some 30 years ago. You may remember those pickup trucks that had the fuel tanks outside the rails. People get hit in the side and they'd burn up in these trucks. He was a whistleblower. GM had a contract that said he couldn't talk to anybody. We subpoenaed him. It went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, a case called Baker versus General Motors that says you cannot muzzle somebody by contract from giving testimony in litigation. We're entitled to what's called every man's evidence. And so the way to get this information from Mark Thaler is to subpoena him, as we have done, to allow them to object, to allow the court to order it, and then he doesn't violate his contract, but we still get the information. So how did he find out about me? It's because I was leaking all this information that I was getting from you and your neighbors about how the fire started. It was in every newspaper in America. He saw it. He called me. Okay? We did it the right way. Then there were articles about trying to get Mark Thaler's files. And so then we started getting calls from other people. This is Mark Thaler's office. These are the files that he's pulled. We're going to get them. Okay? And we're going to do it in an appropriate way. We have since been contacted by a whole bunch of what's called business contractors, companies that Hawaii Electric hired to do primarily two things: trim vegetation, which they're required by law to do, and assess and replace poles that need to be replaced, which they're required by law to do. We have figured out every single contractor they've had, and we've subpoenaed them for all their records about what they knew and when they knew it. And I have a pretty good idea that when we get all those records, you're going to see that while they know how to trim the trees and keep them off the lines like up in the upcountry, they know how to replace the poles. Because of budget cuts to save money, it wasn't done because Hawaii Electric wouldn't pay for it. Okay? So we'll get all those files again. The case against Hawaii Electric is outstandingly strong. Okay? Just the records that we already have, and they haven't given us a single piece of paper, with the Public Utilities Commission, shows that they promised to replace all these poles and didn't, hadn't spent any money replacing these poles. That's why you're here. You've heard a lot about the case against Maui County. I haven't sued Maui County. Did they mess up? Of course. Okay? And we'll get to that. But the bottom line is that the fire starts around 6:39. There's all sorts of witnesses telling the San Francisco Chronicle. There's a down power pole. The power line's ripped out and exposed. It's in the video that you've seen from Shane True. And we go on and on and on and on. The fire department goes out there and is putting it down for several hours, is watching it, and they think it's done. And they go to lunch. Now, I'm not picking on them for going to lunch. They've been fighting fires the night before, the day of. There's more fires they've got to eat. But the bottom line is that it leads to the very understandable question about why did they leave? Why didn't they put the fire out? And this is what some of the folks were asking. I couldn't understand how it is that the fire department could apply 23,000 gallons of water and not put the fire out. Didn't make any sense to me, because all I could see was flat land, which should be pretty easy to do it. We now know that what happened was they put the fire out on all the flat land, but there was a gully, a ditch that had all sorts of trees and branches. I don't know whether you've ever started a fire at a campfire. You want the little twigs to kind of get it going. This thing was full of little twigs to kind of get it going. Last time I was here, John and I went out there and took some pictures, but the bottom line is that these firefighters, I don't criticize them. They thought it was out, but there were little coals, in effect, the bottom of your fire pit, down in the bottom of this gully. You couldn't even see it. It wasn't putting off smoke. They thought it was done when they left, but it wasn't. And then the winds kicked it up, and it started again about 2:53 in the afternoon. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the case against Bishop Trust. The second thing that Maui perhaps did wrong is, why didn't they sound the siren? Okay? When you do these cases over and over and over again, you see the same thing. There are about 34 people who lost their lives in Sonoma County because some guy in the Sonoma County Dispatch Office decided he didn't want to cause trauma. He didn't want to freak people out, so he didn't turn on the siren. So instead of getting 4 hours and 15 minutes of notice that a fire was coming, these people got less than 5 minutes to get out. And 34 of them lost their lives. Same thing happened here. You have a perfectly good siren system. Yes, it is for tsunamis, but it works both ways. If a siren goes off, you go outside your house, you look at the ocean. If there's not a wave, you probably turn around and look the other direction. They didn't give you that opportunity, which is a shame, okay? We know generally from the witnesses how long it took from the time that this fire rekindled in the gully until it extinguished a whole lot of Lahaina. Now, I'll tell you this. I've done too many of these cases. If you got out with your life, and everybody in here did, it's probably not causally related to you losing your home. You have the right to be pissed off about it. If, God forbid, you lost a family member, it has everything to do with why you lost that family member. Okay? So the 99 people that lost their lives, in part, lost their lives because they were not given the notice, the chance to get out. Okay? Because of this failure to do the siren. This is the gentleman that kind of took the fall. His name is Herman Andaya. I don't want you to blame Herman Andaya. He was trained not to use the siren unless it was a tsunami. What I see over and over again is a failure to train. Okay? Here's the governor, there's the mayor. He takes the bullet, says, I wouldn't have done it, I wouldn't do it again, and then the next day he's invited to resign for his health. You know, they made this poor man commit hara-kiri, and it wasn't his fault, is what I'm trying to tell you. They didn't train him correctly, okay? So that's a second theory against the county of Maui. There's some stuff about not having enough water to fight the fire. I can tell you that a fire of this magnitude, I'm not sure that would have causally made a difference, but it's certainly something that needs to be cleaned up. Okay? The Bishop Estate. Now, I'm going to admit, I've known John Givens for 35 years. We were moot court partners and mock trial partners in law school. And he's been my buddy for that long. And when he first told me we're going to sue the Bishop Estate, I said, that's absurd. Why would we sue the biggest charity in Hawaii? They do all sorts of good things. You're saying we're going to sue them because their grass wasn't cut? And I was very much against it until he took me to the scene of where this fire started on September the 23rd. For those of you all that were in this room, I'd just gotten back. I tried to describe it. I didn't have the photographs in the PowerPoint, and now we do. So this is about a 6 or 8 foot gully that is full of more little twigs and tree branches and fuel for a fire than you could ever imagine. It is a recipe for a wildfire. The reason those ladies and gentlemen who fought the fire and applied 23,000 gallons of water, they knocked it out on the flatlands on both sides of the gully. But embers dropped into the gully. You couldn't even see them down there. It was like having barbecue coals hidden from you because they were at the bottom. And that's why they didn't see it. That's why there was no smoke. That's why for several hours they thought the fire was out. Several problems with Bishop Estate. This right here is in between the Bishop Estate land and a neighborhood on Lahaina Luna Road. This is what's called a fire break. It was built by the Bishop Estate. Not very well. It's not a good fire break. Doesn't matter. That neighborhood didn't burn up. But what's important to me is they built it because they knew of the hazard of fires. They'd had a fire in 2019. They'd had one in 2022. They built this. Because of all this very public release of information that's got my name on it, I get calls from people. I know that they were told, the Bishop Estate, we'll go in and clean this gully out for you. And we're told, no, we don't want to pay for that. So we know that they know that this is a fire risk because they built a fire break. We know what this looks like. It's obvious to anybody that cares to look that all of the fuel that you could ever need to start a fire is in there. The new piece of information that I would give you is literally 3 hours ago, I interviewed some folks who got video of that. And the bottom line is that I have to show causation. I have to show what happened. And of course, Maui Electric's sitting here and saying, oh, no, we don't know how it rekindled. Remember, maybe it's a different ignition source. That's nonsense. It was the same ignition source. It's the same thing. But the bottom line is the fire started in that gully. It rekindled in the gully on Bishop Estate land. I've got witnesses that are 50 feet away from it. Okay? So, we had the utility that started the fire. Their liability is not interrupted by the failure of Maui Fire Department to completely put it out, even though they tried hard and thought they'd put it out. But you have superseding or additional liability for why it rekindled. And that's because the Bishop Estate allowed a tinderbox to exist in an area where they knew fires would occur, so much that they built a fire break. And so that's the problem. The video, if I had time to put it in here for you, started here, raced down the gully towards the highway, jumps the highway, and you know what it did to Lahaina. Okay? The location where it jumped the highway is state of Hawaii land. State of Hawaii should have built a fire break and did not. So the state has liability. Now, I happen to be a big fan of your governor. I think he's very bright. But the reason he's offering this fund that you're reading about is he knows that they've got liability for failing to build a fire break, and so the fire jumps the highway and extinguishes the town of Lahaina. So all of a sudden, after we go out there, there's articles about an overgrown gully. Where did those articles come from? Well, we told them about it. Okay? And I'm telling you that the bottom line is that this overgrown gully is the reason the fire rekindled in effect. The wind was able to stir it up, and it's the reason that your town is gone. The witnesses say it was not manicured at all. No kidding, you saw the same pictures I did. This is a gentleman who watched and took video on August the 8th after the flames reignited there. We have that video coming straight out of the overgrown gully, which makes this partially the Bishop Estate's responsibility as well. You've heard a lot about non-native grasses. On the left is what Lahaina looked like in 1985. On the right is what it looked like in 2023, immediately before this fire. The color difference should tell you everything you need to know about weather patterns, whether this is likely to be a combustible fuel source as opposed to something that's wet and not likely to be ignited. It's not enough that you blame global warming. Again, I don't care what your politics are and whether you agree that it's happening or why it's happening. We know it's different. And so the degree of care that somebody that's transporting 2,000 volts of electricity in high wind must utilize to prevent the ignition of what's so obviously a ready fuel source exists. And that's a fact that exists whether you are Hawaii Electric or the Bishop Estate refusing to clean out an overgrown gully. Okay? It jumped the highway in an area of state land where the grass was up about this high. Also a problem, failure to put in a break, failure to trim the grass. So those are the different parties. John has been on a committee that I've served on as well, creating what's called a master complaint, where all the different claims against all the different entities are going to be alleged on behalf of everybody. That master complaint will probably get filed this week, maybe next week, maybe a couple of weeks from now, but you'll see it and we'll get you a copy of it. It'll show you in great detail what we alleged in Jan's case, which was the first one that we filed, I think, the Wednesday after the fire, all the new theories, but bottom line is you're going to see that the electric company is not the only party that has responsibility here. So what's the litigation process update? The main thing, and Jan said it best, we got organized on our side. We're organized. About 2 Fridays into our investigation, Jan agreed that we could call every lawyer in Maui and invite them to a weekly Zoom call. We have it Friday at 11 a.m. local time. Okay? So usually Jan and Naomi and Jeff and John, myself, all these other lawyers, it started off a little small, and we would just share information about what we were learning. It got bigger. I couldn't put enough of these screens on the screen now about how many people are involved as we're all working together. And so the lawyers are organized. As he mentioned, the judge didn't want to talk to 200 lawyers, so we picked 5 to speak for us. I insisted on one of those calls that it can't be a bunch of mainlanders. I may think I'm the best fire lawyer in the world. This is a Maui lawsuit that needs to be run by Maui lawyers that are trusted by people from Maui. So 3 out of the 5 are lawyers here in Maui. Cynthia Wong's a good lawyer. Jacob Lowenthal's a good guy, young guy, but I hit it off with him. I like him. And Jan's kind of our leader. We've got Mark Davis, who's a buddy of mine, outstanding lawyer from Honolulu, and a gentleman from Los Angeles who I like as well. So those are our leaders in front of the judge, okay? And that's appropriate. We've entered into, or we're going to, into what's called a joint prosecution, common interest, and cost sharing agreement. That's good for you because regardless of who your lawyer is, if we're all working together, it's more efficient. Those 3 experts that I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars already on, we're making available to everybody, okay? Because this is a community-wide project to get your homes rebuilt, and lawyers need to be working together, not arguing with each other. And we're doing that. The cases are being consolidated in front of a single judge. In the Second Circuit on Maui, there are 9 judges, 4 circuit court judges, 3 district court judges, 2 family court judges. There's 1 guy who's in charge of this case, and that's efficient. This master complaint will be filed, I think, next week. John's given me maybe 2 weeks. I'm not sure, but they're almost done. I've seen drafts of it. Discovery requests have been prepared, have been served in some of the cases. We're going to get all that out. Frankly, I'm not as worried about that because we've already gotten so much discovery from Congress, which is good, and from the stuff we pulled from the Hawaii Public Utility Commission. As Jan said, our next status conference is November the 1st. I'll be blunt, I probably shouldn't say this in a way that I could try this case and win it tomorrow. Okay? Lawyers kind of get all juiced up about working on stuff for a long time. That doesn't really help people that are burned out of their house and home. We need to speed this along. So we'll go in and ask for trial settings as quickly as we can to apply pressure. The first trial I think was already set. There's one in October, one in November. I've already told Jan, go in and ask for August. Let's go. Okay? I don't think any of those trials are ever going to happen because I think they're going to take bankruptcy. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We settled the PG&E case out of bankruptcy. So what are the different resolution pathways that exist? Well, that's really up to the board of directors of Hawaii Electric Industries. It's really up to Ms. Kimura and the people who are advising her. If I were advising her, I would tell her, you are cooked. And she knows she is. This is a punitive damages case all day long. The reason they're not in bankruptcy is because they're doing this. They're pointing sideways at the county of Maui, somewhat appropriately in some of these theories. The siren, again, doesn't have anything to do with why you were burned out of your house and home. The death cases, everything to do with it. Okay? The failure of the fire department to completely put the thing out before they went to lunch, I didn't really understand that. These are good people who did the best they could until I realized the hidden nature of where the coals, in effect, could be hidden in the bottom of an 8-foot ditch. Okay? And so that's on the trust. We could end up in bankruptcy court. The stock had been at $40 pretty consistently. I literally was out here with Jan on a weekend, and a reporter from Bloomberg called me. He says, what are you doing? Thought I was working on this other case. And I said, I'm in Maui. What are you doing out there? I'm investigating this fire. What do you think? And just kind of flippantly, this kind of my friend, I said, everything I look at, the witnesses, the videos that I'm being sent, all the Google Earth stuff, everything tells me it's Hawaii Electric. He published it on a Sunday. It was picked up by the New York Post later on a Sunday. And I was doing a deposition out here in that other case on Monday, and the stock dropped from 40 to 20 in about 3 hours based on that one quote. As the market realized for the first time that this was not a grass fire of unknown origins, it was caused by Hawaii Electric, which means that they're just like PG&E, they owe somebody a lot of money. Stock's at about $12.35. Now they're in trouble financially, but it's not necessarily a bad thing if we go into what's called Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's a reorganization. It could speed things up. So we'll see. They've only got $165 million in liability insurance, which isn't going to do any of you any good. Okay? So that's going to make it more likely that we end up in bankruptcy. So we've been consulting with bankruptcy lawyers from Brown Rudnick and a bunch of other firms, a financial analyst firm from Houlihan Lokey. They're all on these Friday calls. I consult with them, it feels like daily. They've done financial analyses of the company for us. We know what the liquidity is. We know what the near-term liquidity forecast is. We know what all the factors are. It's ugly. Okay? They're under a state obligation to go, in effect, green, energy independent, carbon-based, or carbon-free. They've got to rebuild the grid on that part of Maui. They've got to pay all these claims. They don't have enough money. And so that's something that tends to suggest that we could end up in bankruptcy. So all of the best bankruptcy firms across the United States have been romancing us, wanting to be our bankruptcy lawyers. Of course, we've got Chuck, who will work with one of them if we go to bankruptcy, which will end up being in Honolulu. If that happens, again, when it happened in PG&E, it scared me to death. But it turned out to be really good. It sped everything up. okay? If they file bankruptcy, we'll have to get your claims ready faster through what's called a notice of claim process. We did 16,000 of them in 2019. But from the time we did them, I had the case settled 3.5 months later, which was good, okay? All right, a couple of other things I want you to keep an eye out. When you are the governor of a state with a disaster like this, your political future is at risk. And Governor Green, as far as I can tell, has done a really good job, but he is rightfully worried to death. So he's talking about this fund, okay? A couple of problems with this fund. It only applies to death cases and injury cases, not to the property values. It doesn't have any money in it. It doesn't come near to paying you what you need to pay. So there's going to be a fund where they come out, sign here and sign away your lawsuit, and we'll give you some money. Do not do it without talking to us first. It's ultimately your decision, but trust me when I tell you, you can sign away your lawsuit for a nickel if you're not careful. So we'll advise you on that, okay? One of the things we're working with the governor on is tax relief. And here's the concept. Number one, you shouldn't have to pay property taxes on a property that burned down through no fault of your own. Number two, what we're trying to do in California, and we've gotten the California state legislature to do it, now we're trying to get Congress to do it, is just because you get money in a lawsuit, you shouldn't be taxed on it, because that money is intended to rebuild a house that you already owned, paid for with after-tax dollars. So it's kind of a double taxation deal. So we'll be in Honolulu when the legislature meets in January, pushing all these things that are very important. The work each of you need to do soon. Now, we are here not 3 months out of the fire. I have learned in looking in your eyes, fire after fire after fire, it's not fair for me to make you do work for your lawsuit in the first 3 months after this. You got bigger fish to fry trying to find a place to live, trying to put food on the table. I'm going to leave you alone until after Christmas, okay? I want you to try to have some semblance of a holiday season. Hold your loved ones, hug on them, love on them, get through the holidays, but be ready to go to work in January. What do we need you to do? Number one, housing. There's all sorts of programs. Keep your ears open about this housing opportunity. The legislature's going to meet. There's going to be all sorts of stuff that we'll tell you about. Government programs. This is not anything wrong. You're not going on charity or welfare if you're worried about that. Who cares? That's why we have it here for stuff like that. That's why we have FEMA. Take advantage of these programs, please. Okay? Just watch what you sign. Wow, this thing's gone nuts on me. And then it jumped out. Can you get me a new one of these before the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Just give me a second.
I got you.
Okay, right here. The Catholic Charities of Hawaii are doing stuff. Please let these charities assist you. Okay? All right. If you've not gotten a $1,000 payment from Maui United Way, go get it. It's there for you. There are people all over the United States feeling for you that have sent money to try to get you through part of this. $1,000 doesn't get you very far, but it's better than zero. What's going to happen starting in January? We're going to have to start proving all of your elements of damage, all of your property damage. Our firm built a proprietary database to hold all of your information. Okay? We know that a lot of it burned up in the fire, all your papers. We know about how to go get that stuff from third parties. And I'd love to start right now because I know how to do this. It's just not polite. Okay? We're going to let you get through Christmas, and then we're going to put you to work in January, okay? I figured Jan and I can work on the liability and keep ourselves busy. I think you can already tell I'm pretty proud of our liability case. We're doing good. Just start collecting things about if you have to prove everything you lost. And it's going to be stuff like proving you own the home, proving you own the car. Maybe you have to go down to get some government records. Your personal property. A lot of us think of our net worth. My house is worth $500,000. But you're forgetting about all the stuff in it. All the birthday presents, the anniversary presents, the Christmas presents, the furniture that your father gave you when you first got married. The cost to replace that is prohibitive. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars per house. We've got to go in and recreate that. I'm going to send you to what's called Contents College. You're going to hate it. It's also very cathartic. But we'll take you through and teach you how to reconstruct everything that got burned up. You are entitled to reimbursement for all the stuff outside your house on your property. The cost to rebuild a driveway, brushes, trees, all that stuff is expensive. A lot of you were injured. Hospitals were full of people with burn injuries. We need to get compensation for that, and God forbid if you're one of the families of the 99 that have been announced, I am so sorry, okay? But we will get you compensation for that. If you lived and worked in Lahaina, you have a business claim or a lost wage claim. You just do. The whole side of the island got shut down. Start thinking about what your tax returns were last year versus what they're going to be this year, and we'll get that information back for you. Lastly, in terms of general liability, please hold on to this and don't let it get run over by a truck. This has information that is so valuable to me. The couple that I met with an hour before this has video of the fire rekindling in the ditch. That is the single most important piece of information we have in this case. All of you have videos and pictures of that day. I'm going to collect those from you.
It does two things. It allows my fire spread guys to know exactly what the fire looked at, because your phone notates what time the picture was. It'll help us with spread. We'll reconstruct that. I know what happened, but I want to visually show terms. The second thing
is it will prove that you were in what's called the zone of danger, which entitles you to mental anguish damage for the hell that you went through. Okay? There's a young man in the back of the room that's got two gorgeous little girls that's telling me about the drive through all this stuff. That is compensable, because a lot of you thought you weren't getting out of this fire alive. Okay? And you have mental anguish, and I'm going to take off my lawyer hat and put on my psychologist hat. I come from South Texas, and we have something called machismo. We're macho. We don't whine about stuff. We're too tough. We're from Texas, for God's sake. It's all nonsense. I don't care whether you are a male that bench presses 500 pounds or a 5-foot, 80-pound female. If you were caught in the middle of this fire trying to get out, you have post-traumatic stress disorder. You must work your way out of that. You need to get into group. You need to talk to priests. You need to get together on social media and talk about it and work your way out of it, or it will eat you up. Okay? So we'll work on all that, but I need the pictures to show that you were in the zone of danger. In January, we'll start loading all this stuff into our database. The guys here have done this in fire after fire after fire. They know exactly what to do and how to do it. We won't steal your pictures. We'll scan them in and give it back to you. It'll all be in this big database. We'll make you go through a contents list. Not yet. You get until after Christmas, okay? But we'll go room by room through all that stuff. And then lastly, and most importantly, we are not leaving until this job is done, okay? I was really proud of what Jordy said about all the different places we are. Our job is to be where you are. Okay? I'm trying to stay out of your hair, except for these meetings once a month and when you want to come to us. But I will become a big pain in your side in January, because we have work to do in order to get you a full recovery. I'm just telling you, haven't done this before. I can win liability tomorrow. These people owe you money. That's all I can get for you. How much money you get is a function of the job that you do starting in January to prove your damages. And we'll do it over and over again. This office will be here open, available. You come anytime. We'll be here until the job is done. What questions do you have?
I have one.
Go ahead.
So you talked about the telephone. When I was trapped, well, in the fire, trying to get out of my neighborhood, my phone was in the house, so it happened so fast I couldn't grab my phone. So how do I put everything that I went through, or my brother and I went through, into life?
Okay, so a couple things. So your phone burned up is what you're telling me. Okay. So most of you running with your phone, you have it. So we'll download that. Some of you lost it. A lot of your phone companies take it up to what's called the cloud, and we can redo that. So I need you to call your phone company if you lost your phone, give them the number and ask whether their stuff was saved to the cloud. They only save it for so long, so I don't want you to wait till January on that. Right. Figure that out, okay, because we got to get that stuff back. The second way to reconstruct it is I've done so many of these fire cases, and I'll have somebody, not picking on, I'm now one of the old guys too, but those of us that have gray hair, not picking on you. Oh, I don't have one of these. I still use a rotodialer, and my internet's on AOL if I have internet. Okay, that's not really true anymore. Most everybody's on it. But if you don't have one of these, where your phone is your camera, you have things called kids and grandkids who love to go visit mom or grandma at her house. You go get their phones. I want every Christmas shot taken in your house, every birthday party taken in your house, anything from your kids, your nieces, your nephews, anything that allows me to see what your house looked like before the fire. Okay? So use the people you love to reconstruct that. And why? You may be sitting there, it's Jan's birthday, I'm his buddy, and we sit there and we're doing it from the smile to document the relationship. Okay? Let me just give you an example why I use the pictures. We have a relationship, you're all my clients, everybody smile. All right, your birthday picture is so that we can see all the smiles. What I'm looking for is the size of the room. I'm looking for the clock that I have to pay to replace, the plant that I have to pay to replace, the window, the sign, the flowers, the couch in the back, 65 chairs that have to be replaced. You see the difference? So you're taking pictures for the smiles, but they show me stuff in every room of your house that allows me to reconstruct it, okay? So the answer to your question, your kids, your wife, your neighbors, everybody else's phone. And see if it went to the cloud. Yes, ma'am.
It sounded like he was asking how would you prove that you were in the fire at that moment for the...
Okay, if it was a zone of danger question, there's other ways to prove it. Number one, your neighbors. Number two, you can testify to it. Number three, where your house was and when you left and the like. Number four, to believe it or not, your car has information about where you were and when you were if you drove on your way out. There's all sorts of different ways to do it. This is just the easiest, okay? Yep.
If I could just add on to that, another thing that we'll do when we start to have the meetings that Michael's referring to is we'll ask you about your experience and we'll document that. And we call that your narrative. And that's information that we'll be submitting on your behalf. So the testimony to your zone of danger, your experience.
Okay. What's most likely going to happen, just for whatever it's worth, is eventually, after playing the delay game, and they will, everybody will get together and decide we need to settle this case, and they will put out a big pot of money for everybody to carve up. It wouldn't be fair for me and Jan to carve it up saying you get $2 where you only get $1, because we owe an independent fiduciary obligation to each of you. So the way we deal with that is across law firms, we'll set up what's called a fire victims trust, which is what we did. That's where we put the $13.5 billion. A trustee was appointed who set up all the rules for the trust, how to make an application, and they would make the allocations, not the lawyers, an independent third party. It's usually a former judge, something like that, okay? But each of you will make claims to that trust, and just trust me, I know how to do this, okay? Start collecting your stuff. If your phone burned up, start talking to people that you know were in your house and find the pictures, okay? And again, if we've got to reconstruct where you were that day, I know how to do that as well without the pictures. Who else? Let me tell you how. Go ahead, John. No, you can't be a client. No, kidding.
Darn it. One other thing to keep in mind too is there's strength in numbers. And when it comes time to effect for a bankruptcy, each fire victim will have the right to vote on the bankruptcy plan. The same thing we did with the Fire Victims Trust in California. There were 70,000 fire victims. Each one got to vote on that bankruptcy. And so if you have friends, family, neighbors, other people who haven't done anything to get involved yet, let them know that they can come in and join as well. And those folks have a right to vote ultimately when we get to bankruptcy. And those folks have a right to recover their losses as well. A lot of people, at least we're still talking to, have no idea Hawaii electric caused this fire.
Which is one of the reasons we put it in the paper, but there's two reasons. The vote in a bankruptcy has everything to do with why I settled the case in PG&E. We had the most votes. We got together with all the law firms with the second most, the third votes, the fourth votes, and they knew they couldn't settle it around me. So they had to come up with a lot more money, okay? So vote numbers brings power. The second thing it does is it reduces your expenses bill. You remember my example of Mike Schultz and 2,000 of you? You get the world's best fire cause and origin expert for $500 a piece. If there's 5,000 of you, you get them for $200 a piece. So it's economies of scale. So there's two reasons to get all your neighbors to come and do the same thing that you're doing, okay? It's just important. And plus you want to be neighborly, you don't want them to lose their cause of action. Trust me when I tell you this is a legit lawsuit. What they did, it's not quite criminal, but it's close. Okay? It's not any better than what PG&E did, and they had to plead guilty to 84 counts of manslaughter. Okay? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Can a working 17-year-old that's bought their own car and owned tools, tires, can they make a claim?
Sure. Yeah, they'll be 18 by the time this settles, so yes. Just bring them on in. I'm sorry about the air conditioner. I don't know what happened here. We're trying to save... No, I'm kidding. Next time, let's jack it way down before this meeting. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
When you itemize things, do you have to put a price on it, or?
No, okay, I'm glad you asked that. No. When I take you through Contents College and we go room by room by room by room, I've got this cool program that'll tell you these are the 16 different kinds of blenders. Which one was it? And then I'll go to eBay, and if it's not eBay, but something like it, and they'll tell me how much it costs to replace that blender. The couch in the back, the fake tree in the corner, clocks, how much they cost and like that. So we have, where's Harold?
He's outside talking to us.
Yeah, remember Harold, the guy with the beard? The way he got involved with us is he was an insurance pricer guy. On behalf of insurance companies, Harold would come in and reconstruct what all this stuff cost. And so we stole him from the insurance company, and he gets us in touch with people. You give us a list of 500 things in your house, Harold's team will figure out how to price it, okay? So you don't need to price it, because obviously you don't have the receipts for what you paid for that clock 14 years ago. But I know from Harold, eBay, stuff like it, how much that clock costs to replace, okay? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
What about original artwork that was burned?
Okay, original artwork that was burned, super important. So number one, I would prefer to have a picture of it if you do. They will make you prove what you lost. Here's why. In any mass tort situation, there's always people that try to defraud the system. And it's not a free lunch. Every dollar a fraudster takes out of the pot is a dollar you don't get to split up. So we don't want it to happen either. But if you happen to have a Picasso in your house, I need to know it. Because if you give me a picture of that Picasso, hopefully you had it insured. If you didn't have it insured, you got a picture of it. We know somewhere where you bought it. There's some record of it. I can get art appraisers to tell me how much that cost. Okay? And this is super important. In Santa Rosa, I had Elvis's old car. I had Mary Todd Lincoln's wardrobe. I had a lithograph signed by the 3 pilots that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. I had all sorts of stuff that was virtually priceless. I had a lady who was the world's #1 broker of Chinese coins from before Christ. That lady was paid over $21 million because she had over $21 million of stuff that literally was reduced to molten junk. She was able to prove it. She spent months and months and months and months, okay? So particularly in Lahaina, I've been in those art galleries, okay? There's all sorts of lost art that happened with this fire, okay? So we just need to prove what was there, where it came from, and then we can price it. Anybody else? Yeah.
Was anybody in the water with me?
Was anybody in the water with you? Well, there were a lot of people. Oh, I think the question is the room. Was anybody else in the water?
Fire in the room?
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. You know, when you're on the mainland and you're reading about the Maui fire, you don't know anything about Hurricane Dora. None of us knew it. I didn't know about it until I got here. So why were the winds so high? Now I know. The concept that most people back in the States think is you're sitting in this flat pond taking a bath while the town's burning, and that's sad. When I know now that you were in super dangerous, super, hurricane pushed waves and everything like that, at risk of drowning like nobody's business and watching your town burn down, okay? We've got very good stories from Coast Guard rescues and stuff like that. We'll want to get your stories about how long you were there. The mental anguish claim of the people that were in the water is outstanding. I mean, it's just unbelievable what you went through. I also think you made a smart choice jumping in the water, okay? Anybody else? Going once. Going twice. Guys, I want to tell you how important it is to me. Other than my wife, perhaps the person in this world most dear to me is my 77-year-old mother, who is just retired as a judge. My wife was kind enough to let me take a trip with her once a year for 2 weeks. And literally, today marked the start of that trip. We're going to New Zealand. And I figured out that to get from Texas to New Zealand, you fly right over Hawaii. I told my mom, I'll meet you there. I'm going to go visit with my clients. And I was going to do it on the way back, but then I realized my grandson's turning 7, and that's something I couldn't give up. But the point is we'll keep coming back, okay? We will be here like clockwork. My staff, my lawyers will be here every day, all day, in the hours that they did. I'll be here by Zoom every day, all day. If you want to meet with me, we'll put you on Zoom. Otherwise, I'll be here repetitively. It's not the hardest thing in the world convincing Michael Watts to go to Maui. You live in paradise. We're going to turn Lahaina back into paradise when this is done. You have my word. Okay? Good evening, guys. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you, Michael. Let me say one more thing about the general damages, the emotional distress of everybody. Take some notes right now. 6 months from now, you're going to start forgetting some of the little details that happened. You're going to forget how many people were with you in the water.
35.
So, okay, don't forget that.
Write your narrative now.
Yeah.
Just write it out,
start
3 or 4
your
pages.
narrative right now, because, guys, I've sat through about 200 of you and heard your stories. It is horrendous. You guys almost sent me into counseling, okay? Listening to how hard it was for all of you. So please, write down your narrative now so that we can present it to the court later.
Guys, take these for your neighbors and your friends and your families. We'll print more of them. The more people you get to join you, the more efficient you are, the more power you have in bankruptcy. We can represent everybody if we need to, but feel free to take as many as you like.
All right, thank you for coming.